Hello, everyone. See, we have some few more people still coming on, but my name is Sister Grace Marie, and I am a Felician sister, and I am the chair of the Education Committee. And today we have a webinar about the McGreal Center for Dominican Historical Studies, about training to be a religious archivist with Dr. Christopher Allison. So Christopher Allison, PhD, is the director of the McGreal Center for Dominican Historical Studies at Dominican University in River Forest, Illinois, which is committed to promoting the history of the Order of Preachers in the United States. The center sponsors a book series and scholarly articles about the Dominican family and supports the study of the order through its extensive library and archives. The archives have the collections of 2 contemplative monasteries of women, papers of prominent Dominican scholars, the records of collaborative Dominican organizations, and the archives of the laity of the Central Province. They do extensive consulting with Dominican and other Catholic communities about the future of their collections, have an active national oral history, and an architectural preservation project. Dr. Allison is a historian of American religion and writes primarily about Catholic and Protestant material culture from contact to the 20th century. Some of his recent work has been on Catholic collections and the future of American Catholic history, featured in the American Catholic Studies newsletter, Charism in the Cornerstone, Dominican Women and Sacred Space in the 20th Century Midwest, in U.S. Catholic Historian, and he co-led the Material Religion National Scholarly Seminar in June of 2023 at the American Antiquarian Society. He is one of the founding members of the Chicago Collaborative Archive Center project. He is leading a multi-year Sacred Spaces project funded by the Dreyhouse Foundation to digitally preserve historically significant sacred spaces in the Chicago area. We are also glad to welcome him because he is the keynote speaker at the upcoming Triennial Assembly in September. So, without any ado, here is Dr. Christopher Allison.
Okay, I will share my screen. Here we go. We're all set. Thank you to ACWR for inviting me for this kind of event. And we're going to talk about all sorts of things today. As I said to Sister Grace and other people and Veronica, I'm also very eager to hear about what people feel like they and so I will talk a little bit about what we do at the university. Everybody can see what I'm doing, right? Yes?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about training archivists at Dominican University, and then also I want to talk about several other things today. But the big upshot of this is that, as many people on this call know, that religious archives are unique spaces in the broader archival ecosystem. And so really what I think we have a very proud, I think, legacy of training archivists to work in religious archives. But I think that there's some things, especially in kind of a modern, more secular age, that we have to always kind of navigate, and which is a good thing. We're happy to do that. So I wanted to just preface that before we go through things. Okay, about me, I'm a, as Sister Grace said, I am a historian of American religion. I largely stop after the Civil War. I have my graduate degrees from Yale and Harvard in religious history, and so largely I work in the religious history realm. I have a new book coming out in the next year about relics around kind of interfacing with Catholic and Protestant debates about it in the early centuries of the United States. So one thing I would like to tell you about is that Dominican was one of the first graduate education programs in library science in the country. We're debating a little bit if we were the first, but we will figure that out as we go. And we've had a long history of supplying archivists to religious archives across the country, including Clerician archives, Episcopalian archives, Dominican archives as well. And we have a very proud tradition, at least within our current, since I've been here 3.5 years, that we almost have 100% placement rate for our archivists that come through our program. We are trying to do I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we're trying to do current grant writing to enhance our space in the history of training of religious archives. And we're working with several kind of grant writing institutions. But most of all, I want to hear from you today, because I talk to a lot of people, but I want to make sure that you are heard, and I want to make sure that I want to hear what you feel like you need as a religious archive or a religious institution, because we want to, I mean, like, honestly, we want to be one of the leaders in, helping you staff and provide for religious organizations. So, okay, moving on. Our graduate offerings at the university we do have a PhD in Library and Information Studies. We also have an MLIS in Library and Information Studies, same words. And we also do adult education at the university. I think we're going to mostly talk about adult education today, mostly about how you can supplement a typical MLIS in library science, and with our kind of offerings for you. Okay. Oops, sorry. I'm going to go back. There is something that we're working on right now with several grant funders about creating a religious archive certificate. This would be something you could join to a MLIS or a PhD in library science, and really focusing on some of the issues that are related to specifically religious archives. As many of you will know, that they often have some interesting metadata issues related to them. People change names when they take vows, of course. And so there, and many more things, including to the point of wills, the way that people kind of write things about where they want their things to go when they die, wakes. There's a whole cloud of issues around religious archives that are kind of unique compared to maybe the secular world. And so we felt that there was a need to have a specific certificate to address these issues. In terms of religious communities, I think also, and obviously I come from a Dominican perspective, is that there is also a desire to preach to the future for communities, to extend their mission beyond their historical mission, even in a secular age. I mean, I found in my experience that many of our students have been really inspired by the lived experience of our sisters and how they have called the world into maybe a different realm, if you will, and also trying to kind of call people towards a future of justice and love and all these things that we talk about. But I think that one value of archives sometimes is that we can also use them as a way to inspire the future, even if the past is no longer with us, we can still inspire the future to follow the mission of the community that you're representing. Building trust, ensuring trust, encouraging research. I think this is really important. I think there's been a lot of really good conversations with some of the communities that I've been with that have talked a lot about making sure that we deposit our collections in places that are committed to giving them a kind of good and solid shake, as it were, around their collections. There is suspicion that happens at times around how will you reuse these records? Will you kind of just trash us, But I think really important for us is training people around how do you build trust? How do you ensure that the trust is ongoing? And how do we encourage research into these deep, deep records? I mean, the Catholic Church in the United States was for a long time the largest denomination in the United States. It has been incredibly essential in the history of education, healthcare, immigration, and so on and so on and so on. And so we want to make sure that collections are not abused, but we also want to make sure that they are used, if that makes sense. So not abused, but used, and so that we can elevate the history of the Catholic experience in the United States. And then finally, I will say dumpster or preservation, and that's kind of like a rough and dirty way of saying it, but really we hear from communities that sometimes this is the question, do they want to, are they going to put their collection in a dumpster or do they want to preserve it? This is a hard part of it. Where really you have to decide if you want to preserve the collection or if you want to kind of remove it from the world. I am on the preserving side of this, but obviously this leads to other questions like, can you provide resources to preserve it for perpetuity? I think we all should, as a position. However, sometimes folks don't feel that way all the time, and I think that we have to have those conversations and really convince people that their mission mattered and it really is for the good of the world. And but we have to often talk about money, and if we can conserve these things for perpetuity. Okay, so as Sister Grace said, we are also working really around architectural material culture preservation also, and doing it digitally. We know that we cannot conserve every single space in the United States. We understand that. That is just part of the way, we just know that. But we can do it digitally and for very small price point. So if you want to see some of our work, you can see our work at McGrealCenter.org. We're doing a lot of work around Dominican institutions and also in the city of Chicago. So this is an image of Cincinnati Mound, Our Lady of the Rosary Chapel, which is a beautiful space, but has recently been deaccessioned. And so we want to do some work around digital preservation of spaces that will be deaccessioned in various ways, but especially around Dominican life. Here's my pitch. Our certificate would really augment traditional MLIS training. So as many communities are hiring lay archivists, you probably are hiring somebody who has an MLIS. So Masters of Library and Information Studies or Sciences, depending on how they word it. Or you might have a lay archivist who is also working in the archive in some way. And we want to augment that training as well. And we also hope to do some on-the-ground video series. We hope with grant support, free to communities with professional videography. And I would think the way I phrased it this morning was just think kind of like a masterclass kind of like video, where somebody who really knows what they're doing can kind of deliver wisdom and knowledge to you as a community, and do it effectively, with all the beauty and the good things that happen with good videography. But I think really we want to try to provide modules, if you were, as it were, for training in kind of living religious archives. We also want to join this with a on-the-ground practicum wherever you are in the country or in the hemisphere, so that you could not only watch these videos, take quizzes, and read things, but also be on the ground, handling the documents, handling the material, annals, etc. And wherever you are, that they would be some kind of practical experience that somebody could really give you some kind of pointers around how to navigate these things. One thing that we hear a lot about is the passing on of our knowledge of archival management and multimedia organizing software. Those are kind of two different things right now. I wish they were the same thing, but they're not quite yet. But there's a lot of archival management softwares available to people. Access to Memory is one of the big ones. Archive Space is another one, though I'm a little bit grumpy about how they deal with multimedia, but that's another issue. And then there's also obviously some other softwares that also help with pictures, video, kind of other non-textual things or non-manuscript things that can also help communities to organize their material. So Omeka is a big one. Content EM is another big one. It's more expensive because it's proprietary, but nonetheless, we want to make sure that we pass on a menu of options for communities so they can decide what they want to do and what they can do within their capacity. Also, finally, we want to help you navigate potential legal liability and copyright issues. There are issues around this that we need to walk people through. I'm not a lawyer. I probably should have become one. I would have made more money. But nonetheless, I mean, like there's a sense where around intellectual property that we have to understand what is within bounds, what can we make publicly available, and what things do we need to restrict. And so we can talk that through with you if that's something you wanted to do. And I think this is really all a part of this kind of certificate program where we kind of try to help you understand it. And I understand that like a lot of communities are really nervous about legal liability issues. But I don't think we need to be nervous if you have the right knowledge, if that makes sense. So I think there's some good information available to us, and hopefully can help us to feel less scared about these things and feel more confident as we go towards the future. Okay. Here is some of the topics that we feel like we need to cover in this certificate. Acquisition and assessment. That means largely when you bring in a collection, and also how big is the collection. That is also usually measured in linear feet in the library science world. How do we navigate images in multimedia, which I already talked about? How do we deal with objects, which is a very interesting topic, especially when we think about three-dimensional objects and how we navigate those things. Cataloging in a official library system, archival software, multimedia software, which is, once again, two different things. Climate control, making sure humidity is low and the temperature is right in the space that you're carrying things or holding things. Intellectual and copyright issues, which I just talked about, and then preservation and legacy. Preservation in terms of just making sure that we have a ongoing record of the communities like gifts to the world. And then also legacy, I think, is really more about storytelling. How do we help communities tell their story and tell them publicly and tell them well? I think that's the biggest thing on the legacy issue. So last thing I will say, full disclosure, I am also part of the board of the Chicago Collaborative Archives Center. We are working on this actively as a place to go. We welcome your help, of course, but we hope to have a set of buildings in the downtown of Chicago, which is centralized, that would be a big center for Catholic historical study, but also for other religious and nonprofit organizations, which has not really been available heretofore. If you read a lot of studies of Catholic life in the United States, you'll notice the amount of legwork people have had to do to pull it off. And really the idea here is that hopefully we would have a Western, a Central, and an Eastern centers for archival preservation and study. And hopefully this would also, and we think, I feel fairly confident about this, that we feel like that scholars would be drawn to these places and be able to tell bigger stories than we've ever even known heretofore. We must come together. So collaboration is the future. We cannot be siloed anymore. I cannot say this enough. This is where we can share resources and knowledge and be more efficient. And once again, the immense research potential. I don't want us to, pass by the story of, in this case, American Catholicism in America, because it's a huge story, and we need to come together and make it happen. It's just no way around it. Oops. Here's what I've heard, and I want to hear more from you. Quotations. We need guidance around professionalizing our archive. I'm worried that our community is going to abandon our history. This often comes from the archivist who is in charge of the community. We're nearing completion or historical completion, and we need help for the future. What should we do with our art? How can we carry on our mission into the future? I'm not sure what is in our archives, but I want to set a restriction upon them. That one is one that I like to talk to people a lot about, because the unknown can be the enemy of the known, or the possibly known, I guess we could say. And so that is a question that comes up quite a bit. no community wants to be legally liable for some kind of court or like suing situation. Digitizing means that I can throw the paper out when we're done, correct? That is not correct. I just worked with a group in Trinidad about this, and digitization is important, but you need to have it hand in hand with the paper record. Otherwise, if the internet fails or the paper fails, we have a redundancy on two sides. Also, often religious communities have a system, and they've served them well because it has largely been tailored to the needs of the community. We know how we can access annals. We know how we can access personnel files. We know how we can get bio files for wakes or funerals or whatever it might be. But how do we translate that to a modern MLIS kind of system? That's really the question. And then how do I do digitization? It is easy once you get into it, but it is hard at the beginning. So we have to talk to communities about how do you digitize your archive, and also who gets access to it and how do they request access to these things. If you want to talk to me further, the easiest way to reach me is through email. If failing that, you can call my office at this number. We regularly do consulting with communities, but if you feel so led, we would welcome any support for our services. My boss would be on my back and say, I should always make that ask. But we do not require it. I mean, this is really, I come from a division of ministry, and so I think this is really a service for broader communities. And so we don't require any kind of payment. And if we don't know the answer, we probably know somebody who does have the answer. So please feel free to avail yourselves of our services. And finally, I will say what I need from you. And I think as a student of this kind of work, I would encourage you to be as transparent as possible. And we can do that offline and on the phone and never make a record of it. But I promise you, I will keep your confidence in whatever way that I can. Please, if you have any donors in your life around adult education for religious communities, please connect us. We have to fund this kind of work for this kind of certificate. So, and also, if you are religious, and I'm sure that most people on this call are, I just ask for your prayers for this work. I think it's really important, and what gets me up in the morning. And I encourage transparency as much as legally viable. So you might have to talk to your leadership about this, of course, but I tend to fall on the side of transparency as much as we can, because I think this is helpful for us to understand as human beings and Christians and people, that we can be as clear as possible. If you have any students and adult learners, send them to our university. So if you have a MLIS lay archivist that has joined your community, I think we have an opportunity here to up their game, as it were, to really get their heads around religious archives, and in ways that they probably were never trained. So that is probably, I think there's like 3 Catholic universities in the United States that offer a master's degree in library and information sciences. We are one of them. But in general, they tend to be public universities. And so they often are not attuned to the, like I said earlier, the unique issues around religious communities. Embrace your history. Don't run away from it. It's a trailing edge of mission, and I would encourage you to not go, to not abandon that record, because it really, really, really has mattered in the world. And I want you to, if I can encourage you anything, to not, not, like I said, not go quietly into the night. Yeah, your history matters. It really does. And you, and I think most religious communities have done more than the world knows, and we have to be bold about that. And so back to the next one: be bold about what you've done in ways unseen, and it is witness, right? So obviously, it is a witness of the Holy Spirit's presence among us, and even when we fail, it is also a witness when we fail. So we prepare to face some hard things. We do so in hope and grace. I hope we are people of grace, and the power of history can really put a community on the map. I've seen this time and time again, that people who had no clue what a hospital was named after, or what a school was named after, or whatever, but when they start getting into the history of it, they come alive and they start to believe and carry on what we would say the charism of the community. And I think that is something I really, I mean, obviously I'm biased, I'm a historian, but like, believe in the power of history. Really do. It does have power. I mean, I think the record of our past really can inspire the future. Tell your story and be sure that you trust the person who's telling your story. And I think that's one thing that we've been talking about in our Chicago Collaborative Archives project, is really about finding kind of an ombudsman kind of typical like situation where there's somebody who is kind of responsible for the integrity of the collection and making sure that it's not abused, it's not misused, but that it is actually furthering the mission of the community. Okay. And I think I'm done.
Well, thank you, Dr. Allison, for your sharing and your information and your passion, and for your interest in our response to this work. So now I open this up to all of you. We ask for your reaction. Do you have any questions? Do you have something you want to share, or any comments, any feedback? You can put it in the chat and send it directly to me, and I'll make sure, time permitting, it gets in. Or you can raise your hand and you can do it that way too. So we have a few already in the chat. The first one was, will the slides for this be available? This is being recorded, and the video will be posted, and that video will include the slides and the speaking. So yes. There were two regarding the programs at the university. So the first one was this certificate program for religious archives. Is it available only in person, or is it available online as well?
Yes, the quick answer is it would be completely online. So yeah, so it could be done remotely, and it's really just intended to be a kind of addition to your previous training as a professional librarian or archivist. So yep.
Okay. And then a follow-up about the certificate program is, which you might have just said, but I'll just, for clarification, repeat it. Will archivists have to have an MLIS to participate in the certificate program?
No, not at all. So yeah, religious archivists, if they've not done the MLIS, it would be completely free to them, and hopefully they could access it at any time. So, yep.
Okay. And we have someone in the gallery. Diane, what's your question?
I'm in Canada, so we have a slightly different way of doing things with archives here. But I did an MLIS here in Canada, and I've been working in religious archives for 26 years, Catholic religious archives. And my question related to your last point, to tell your story and entrust your story to those who understand you. Unfortunately, I found that nobody understands the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And a big issue is people don't want to tell our story. They want to tell their story using our records, assuming our records actually should belong to them.
Mm.
So there's an issue there, and this deals largely with the question of, in Canada and in the United States, the Indian schools
Right.
have been a big issue for all of us, and it's becoming a big issue in the States. Is that there is a focus that, regardless what the record is, if it's in our archives, some groups figure they should have carte blanche access to those records and in reality, most of the records are not about them, they're about the community.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
What do I think? Yeah, I mean, this is a huge issue also with around kind of pre-sexual abuse issues, especially in the United States, I would say. I think there is there are communities who have kind of figured this out, I believe, who have tried to suss out what the intentions of a researcher is. Of course, you can never control everything that anybody does, right? So there's a certain level of you have to let go at a certain point. However, there can be a slanted view, and that, like you said, Diane, does not understand how the polity of the church works, and can sometimes misinterpret things that they shouldn't have interpreted that way. I can give you footnotes on that. So I think there's I want to say two things. I want to say, on the one hand, there's only so much control we have, right, around these things. On the other hand, we also have an educational kind of mission to help people understand how to navigate this world, which is a big world. It's a big world. It's an international world. It's one that is tied to Rome. There's the orders, the diocesan structures. We have to help them understand. They might not have come to us trying to understand, but we can help them get there, And I think that's one of our roles, really, as people who take care of collections, is really help them, and also I'll say too, more pastorally, also help them refine their research interest. So you might have come to me for this reason, but I think really what you want to talk about is this reason, this thing. And I think there is a element of that in these archives that are important to you're not going to try to write somebody's book for them, obviously, but you're going to try to encourage them to see a bigger picture that they might not already see. Yeah.
One other point is, a lot of times it's not so much that they're writing a book or doing research per se. Their idea of research is getting copies of the records and incorporating them as theirs in their archive.
Yeah, how do you handle that? Because in the United States, that would not be kosher, as it were.
Technically, there's copyright issues and all sorts of
Yeah.
privacy issues and things like that that apply. But that is the understanding of a lot of people out there, is that they can just go and say, okay, I want all your records from this location. Thank you very much. We're starting our archive.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've
I mean,
actually had people ask me that.
I believe it. Yes, I completely believe that. Yep. And there's a little bit of a trend among young scholars to create your own archive, as it were, which is not always nice or fair, you know, in terms of like traditional archival practice. But I understand why people are doing it. I think they see that they start their own website, they drop a bunch of information on the website, and then they have kind of a claim to, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
I understand what you're saying, Diane. I don't have a clear solution for you, but I have sensed a resurgence of that kind of impulse in the last 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
Thank you.
okay. Thank you for that. We have several questions in the chat about the programs that the university offers. So can you provide links to us with information about the adult learning program, the certification program?
Yeah, so those should be available by, so I don't have them right now because our marketing department is doing them, but we should be live by September 1 on this. So but I could send it to you, Sister Grace, about once we have the links for those signups, we can get them going. And also we're kind of also waiting on some grant funding, and if anybody has any deep pocketed friends, just let me know.
Okay. So are the particulars of these courses set up? For example, what's the schedule like for the adult learning program? Like, how often are the classes?
They would be 10 weeks. Is the structure of it, and it would just, we wouldn't give you an official degree, but we would give you a kind of we would give you a document, of course, about that, and largely we would do them by semester, which is typically how we run things. So September to December, January to May, 10 weeks of time. That's what we would largely offer.
Okay, thank you. And we
Yeah.
have another hand up in the gallery, Malgate.
Thank you. You know, a couple of things that I think are worthwhile to consider. First of all, about Diane's comment, what happened at Boston College when you used any of their material in the Burns Library, you really have a copyright stamp that you give them, in the sense that they know that this is a one-time use only, and they can't create their own library, because David Horn once said jokingly that somebody had created an alternative archive for Graham Greene, since they had his papers and kept them, and that's an issue. And I know that when Sue Ellen Hoy deposited her paper with the Leadership Conference archives at the Gannon Center at Loyola, she had all these copies from archives in Ireland, and she had to get permission to even deposit them with the Gannon Center. And I think that's critical. I think that Canada presents a different situation than the United States. I think due to the Conference on the History of Women and Religious, the collections in the US are much more active and used. And it's creating a whole new generation of scholars. I think the other thing that you need to do in order to get the collections known, though, is you need to develop with people who've used your collections to foster greater use and greater expansion. Now, right now, I'm working with the American Casanese Benedictine men. And what we have done, and I'm kind of creating an archival program for them, but what I did on my own, one of the things that puzzled me about the Benedictines, having been a Benedictine for 32 years, is their attitude towards race. And so we've developed 5 scholars who are looking at this, and we have started a study group. And the point of the study group is really to educate ourselves about the issue of race and why Benedict's rule can really, they start working with African American and the enslaved in the 1860s and proposed to establish a monastery in Savannah in 1870. So it's an interesting concept. There's Black Benedictine monks in the 1870s and 80s at St. Vincent and St. Mary's in Newark, New Jersey. So that's something that I think that each of us should look at. What are the collections that could interest scholars, or if you're associated with local universities, to really start getting the collections out there. But I think the one thing we don't realize, and this is my pitch always, is that there are 2 types of archivists. There is the humanist archivist and the information manager. What we need is humanist archivists, people who know what the charism of the community is and how the charism drives everything they do. And I think that's critical in any education program, because you can be an information manager, but you might as well be working for the federal government. I mean, our heart, you can find the heart of an institution, the people who drive that institution in the records. It's just the fact that we do not know, we don't have the people to know how to uncover that. It's like, you know, they have eyes, but they cannot see, and ears, but they cannot hear. But I think that's critical in looking at the archives, and it's critical in training, especially with religious archives, whether you be Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, or Jewish. There's an inner person that is really coming out, and that is the thing that makes, you know, religious archives very different. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have another thought from the chat, a question. Do you get a sense that a national level ombudsman, I hope I'm saying that right, for Catholic collections is possible, potentially through LCWR?
That would be fantastic if that's possible. Yes. I mean, I think that is a great idea. Or we could even think about a hemispheric one to loop in the Canadians, which I think, like Malachy was saying, that it's a little bit of a different situation there. But I think it's, I think I don't know who would pay that person's salary, you know, or set that higher up. But I think it's a great idea. And I think it's been understudied and underthought in general. I mean, I think there's even Protestant communities, I think, also have not quite gotten their head around this, around, you know, what an ombudsman like situation would look like. I mean, the whole idea about it is that it's someone who's like kind of neutral that you can come to with any kind of issue, and then they are kind of shielded from any kind of retribution. But that is not, it's kind of a revolutionary idea. And I know that a lot of people in this call, we've talked about it quite a bit. But I think it's a good idea. I mean, it's one that we should do if we can. And I think it would make a lot of people feel more comfortable with the transferring of their collections.
Malachy?
Yeah, I've been pushing this idea, and I've mentioned it to Chris for about 2 years. And I think it has to be a national ombudsman of a group of a scholar, a religious leader, and an archivist that would oversee these collections and double them, 2 of each. Be located in LCWR. It has, if it's LCWR, it has to be CMSM as well. It has to be both men and women's communities. And I think the key thing is that when people enter into contracts with repositories, they give the right to the ombudsman to assess and intervene if a collection is being abused. And abuse can occur on 2 different levels. The abuse can occur on deaccessioning material, or not honoring the contract that you have signed, or the policies that you have agreed to. Or the other idea, which is much harder to get, is if the collection is being misused from a scholarship point of view. Remember, these are all private collections. We can determine how they're going to be used, and that is critical to really have somebody assess if the collection is being misused and take action. But it has to be written into the contract in the deposit that you have an ombudsman. There's an appeal to an ombudsman, and that contract is deposited with an ombudsman office. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree. I think contracts are very, very important, and thinking hard and long about, can you retrieve a collection if it's being misused, you know, or yeah, the terms of that agreement, I think, are, I've spent a lot of time on those kinds of things. And I think that's, Malachi's right. I think there is you gotta think it through. Just because it's free does not mean that it is free, as it were. Because one thing about giving something up for free means that you also give up control and a concern for, yeah, and knowledge about what the community is about. So, yeah.
Well, maybe part of that could be the agreement that you make, and that goes to our next question, which is in the chat. If a community is approaching an agreement with a future repository, what are primary considerations that should be included?
I would say, what are your expectations around access? I think that's a big question. I think that some communities I've worked with, they assume that when they deposit a collection with another institution, that they will have the same kind of access that they once had. I don't think that's probably true. You need to have somebody who, I think you have to have the staffing to administer the requests. I think, yes, that would be one of the things. I also think you've got to get the money right somehow. And I think, once again, I think if you invest in an institution, you would get a lot more response than if you don't. And that is a consideration that you have to think about. Otherwise, you just fall into their just general queue. You know, any other library request, any other archival request will just be, it will be the same. But I think there's a wisdom to make sure the terms are clear, and also, like we were saying about, you know, making sure that there's somebody watching and caretaking over the collection, so that it's not, you're not just inviting like hit jobs, you know, into the archival space. So, yeah.
And Diane?
I just wanted to mention that Stephanie Morris has been trying to get your attention, so if you can call on her, she would appreciate it, I'm sure.
Oh, I have not seen her hand.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Sister Grace
Go
Marie.
ahead.
Diane was talking about copies in other institutions. There are several different sides to that. whether lay archives or religious archives, the researchers compile their papers and donate them someplace, and the other place has the copies. And
Yeah.
sometimes the other place will post the copy on their website as being original to them.
Yep.
I have knocked on proverbial doors saying, excuse me, we have that letter, not you. And then there are smaller organizations that don't have extensive collections, religious organizations who've not had archives for 100 years, and they have 1 or 2 letters that pertain to your collection. Well, if you give them copies of your letters to them, that brings in a whole new picture of their history, with the understanding that the originals are in your archives and not in theirs. But it's very important to their history to have those records. And some Native American tribes don't have archives, and they appreciate whatever correspondence or other information, copies of which can be given to them with the understanding that they are copies. But once it's out of your hands, you have no control.
Yeah, you're completely right.
Thank you.
Can I just comment on that? My particular case was an indigenous group that it wasn't records about them per se. They just thought that there was records about this community that they should be able to get. And they weren't. Most of the records weren't about the indigenous community or the indigenous people, except copies of other records that the group that I was working for had obtained from the federal government. In which case I would say we'd have to get those from the federal government. But they figure, I guess they figured that the Catholic Church just gives everything away, you know, because it should be out there for everybody to have access. I've had groups want to publish on manuscripts written by a religious where copyright still exists till 2035, and they figured they should be able to copy or publish it and own copyright on it. And it was his personal memoirs from working in the North. So there is a disconnect between, they really don't understand the Catholic Church. That's
No.
my biggest problem. People do not understand the Catholic Church.
Agreed.
Okay, so we're coming up on 4 o'clock. Any final thoughts or questions? We don't have time to get to all the questions. There's 1 or 2 things in the chat, but Dr. Allison has provided his email address and phone number, I believe, to contact him. And we will continue this conversation at the Triennial Assembly, where he will be speaking and I'm sure engaging us on this or a related topic some more. There's one recommendation in the chat. I can close that part with that there is an excellent webinar that was done on contract questions in Canada that Malachy did with ARCC about an order that housed the collection in a local museum. So it's kind of related webinar that could be referred to. So I want to thank you all for coming, and especially Dr. Allison, and we look forward to hearing more from you and working more with you at the Triennial Assembly. There will be the next webinars in April, 2 mid-April, one with ATLA, which you may know as CRRA, and one which is the second part of the joint CWR series that we're doing. So keep an eye out for those. But thank you for your time and your participation and your sharing.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And I one thing in the chat was defining what an ombudsman is. It basically means just a neutral party who can hear complaints or concerns. And so, but I look forward to talking to you all in September. Yeah.